Our investigation into the UPS crash and the emergency grounding of the MD-11 has produced some very intriguing new information between UPS, FedEx, and the U.S. Postal Service. Also, the FAA expands the new emergency grounding with a new emergency airworthiness directive. That and a FedEx exec says their MD-11s will be back in the air quickly. We'll talk about all that on Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken, and while researching the recent UPS 2976 crash, I've come across some very interesting background information. I'm going to show you what I found that might have huge implications on UPS and FedEx, plus some recent information on the FAA's Emergency Airworthiness Directive, or AD. In the aftermath of the horrible UPS 2976 crash in Louisville, Kentucky on November 4th, the airplane involved, the MD-11, has been grounded by an emergency AD by the FAA. As we started researching both UPS and FedEx, they both have MD-11s, and taking a look at the impact to the companies the grounding of the fleet would have, we started with some obvious questions, and we'll start there with those important questions before we reveal what we found in our investigation. First big question, how will the grounding of the MD-11s affect FedEx and UPS? Well, despite the MD-11s being a small percentage of each company's fleet, UPS, the MD-11s are 9%, and FedEx, it's only 4%. The grounding of the MD-11 long-term could potentially cause major disruptions and economic impact, as the MD-11s were useful in the bigger hauls. In the meantime, both cargo companies have plans in place to anticipate possible disruptions like this, though it's not publicly stated what those plans are. FedEx has already announced that they're shifting some of the air packages to ground, and I'm sure that the two carriers will consider all the options, including renting equipment, utilizing passenger planes, and trucks, trains. This year, deliveries are expected to jump 5% during this holiday season compared to last year, with an estimated 2.3 billion packages to be delivered this holiday season. At the moment, it's unclear if the MD-11 groundings have caused FedEx or UPS to have to adjust their holiday shipping deadlines. The best advice, regardless of what happens, is to order your gifts and your packages for the holidays early, just in case. Next question, what about the pilots of the MD-11 during the grounding? What are they able to do during this time? Well, for UPS and FedEx pilots, they're still going to receive the minimum guaranteed pay despite the grounding due to their contract. But the future contains a lot of uncertainty. The biggest question really is how long the MD-11 will be grounded. And the next question after that is how much it'll cost to fix them once the FAA determines the course of action necessary for the airplanes to be able to be airworthy again. When the FAA grounded the DC-10s in the aftermath of the 1979 crash of American Airlines Flight 191, the grounding stayed in effect for 37 days. The carriers will most likely take a wait and see right now, paying the pilots to basically sit at home. And while a few might have type ratings in other aircraft, they would still need to get current, and that's going to take time. And for those that need to get the new type of rating, it could take even a lot more time, months, many months. And even then, there may not be a need for pilots in those other aircraft types. All right, so could this be the end of the MD-11? Before the UPS crash in Louisville, both UPS and FedEx had existing plans to retire their MD-11 aircraft in favor of adding the fuel-efficient Boeing 767 and 777 freighters. The 767 freighter model carries 2/3 of the MD-11 payload. The 777 carries a little bit more than the MD-11. So the MD-11 has been a decent hauler for the carriers, basically flying 2 legs for every 3 that the 767 would need. A 767 and a 757 equaled 1 MD-11, with 4 engines versus 3 and 4 crew members versus 2. The MD-11 did fill a very nice niche, but with the crash and the emergency AD from the FAA, it's possible that retirement of these planes could occur sooner than expected, depending on when the FAA finds a solution for this AD and how expensive the compliance will be. All right, quick update on the FAA Emergency AD 2025-23-51 that grounded the MD-11s. We covered a lot of details on this in our most recent video, and I'll include a link to that below. First, on November 14th, the FAA expanded the Emergency Airworthiness Directive to ground all DC-10s that are still in use until appropriate inspections can take place with the EAD of 2025-23-53. Currently, according to my research, there's 8 that I can find of DC-10s operating in the U.S., mostly fire tankers. But one airplane that is affected is the MD-10, and that's the Orbis hospital plane that was donated by FedEx employees. If you don't know, Orbis, it's a nonprofit flying eye hospital that does wonderful work around the world. This will hit them hard, I would imagine. Now, the new emergency AD mirrors the language of the first one that grounded the MD-11s. But according to several aviation news sources, including Simple Flying and FreightWaves, FedEx has stated that it expects their MD-11 fleet to not be down long. Chief Financial Officer John Dietrich said on November 11th that mandated inspections can be completed relatively quickly and that FedEx has already deployed alternative aircraft to compensate. What confuses me here, and I've gone back and I've studied the AD with a fine-tooth comb, there is no mandated corrective action yet. So I'm not sure how a carrier can say they expect their planes to be back in the air soon. The language in the AD is this. This AD prohibits further flight until the airplane is inspected and all applicable corrective actions are performed. So yes, I am a bit confused here. I drilled down a lot deeper and I talked to some insiders there at the carriers, and what maintenance people at the carriers are expecting to come out of the FAA after consulting with Boeing is non-destructive testing, NDT, of the pylon and engine mounts on each wing. They estimate between 400 to 800 man-hours per aircraft. Now, the only NDT testing right now is an eddy current, which is basically a way to test solid metal to detect any deformities. I had one done on my Cessna 210 wing spar. It works by swirling electrical currents with a changing magnetic field to try and reveal any flaws inside the metal. This is what the insiders at the carriers are expecting, but nothing has come out yet on this from the FAA, which is why I find it confusing and strange that the CFO of FedEx would make such a confident statement about getting the planes quickly inspected and back into service soon. You know, with my video production company, I do a lot of work with corporations, big corporations, and I'm not saying that this is the way it's happened for sure in this case, but his statement reminds me of an executive just saying things to settle down his customer base. And the customer base, that's not you and me. It's the big other corporations with their massive shipping contracts heading into the holiday season. For example, if I say Best Buy has a contract with FedEx, which I don't know, maybe a statement like the CFO's is meant to assuage any concerns from a Best Buy type. I don't know. I'm just trying to make sense of a CFO statement saying that they're going to get the work done quickly when the FAA and Boeing haven't announced what the work will be. I guess it just goes back to me just preferring honesty rather than spend control. Silly me. All right. Hopefully the confusion will end soon, as there is a meeting in Seattle at Boeing on November 15th with UPS, FedEx, and those Boeing engineers. Okay, moving on. I want to thank Insta360 for sponsoring this video.
I run a film and video production company. You know, quality is very, very important to me. And last year, I bought an Insta360 for the first time. And when I got the cameras, I was amazed at the quality. The image processor is huge, and that's really important to me. And that was just the X4, and now they've got the X5, and I have two of those. And it has a new pure video mode that cleans up low light stuff even more. I love it. And they come in 8K. And speaking of numbers, there were times when I mounted 3 cameras on the outside of my plane or helicopter, and then at least 4 inside. The editing was a huge hassle. It was a mess. With the Insta360, I now just go with 1 on the outside, and with keyframing, I can get a large variety of angles. And for the inside, maybe another 360 and an Ace Pro 2 if I want. You know, I've become a believer that the Insta360 is the best camera for pilots and is what I now recommend. These 2 cameras have rewritten the way I film my flights. I have a link to make it easy. It's down there in the description. They have the new white version as well. I love mine, so go check it out. Buy a Insta360 today. See you later.
Okay, what follows is something our team here has come across interviewing past and current pilots for these carriers and from our in-depth research. The information I uncovered in what follows, I am not saying this is what caused the crash of UPS 2976. It's just very interesting information that I have no doubt the NTSB is looking into. Having said all that, to understand the ramifications of the grounding of the MD-11s, I need to step back in time to January 2001. The United States Postal Service, the USPS, was looking to get out of managing and maintaining their own air fleet for cargo movement. FedEx was awarded the 7-year contract, and overnight, the USPS became FedEx's largest client, and air schedule was multiplied. In those early years, as FedEx struggled to add planes and crews, the airplanes that were in use required a lot more legs. For example, an example only, if a FedEx plane, say, pre-postal service flew for 6 hours in a day, now it was flying 18 with a lot more turns and legs and a lot less downtime for quick maintenance. Sure, the major important stuff was still being done. Many of the less critical maintenance items started to stack up and were simply deferred to get the packages out. Up until that time, FedEx had a really good safety record. And in those first few years of the USPS contract, they had several hull losses. Insiders in the company called it the FedEx bump, referring to the increase or bump in aircraft incidents during that time after the contract had begun. Now, FedEx had prepared, but people I interviewed say it was just a lot bigger and more overwhelming than the management thought it would be. They were just simply overwhelmed in those early years. And FedEx got better. They got more planes, they trained more crew, they got improved equipment, and then things settled down. The contract extended and time marched on. As we started getting out of COVID, the contract was once again coming up for renewal, and FedEx had grown to the point where the USPS work was just not as profitable. They negotiated for better terms, and the two sides just couldn't agree. During 2021, the Postal Service shifted more air parcels to the ground network, and this benefited the USPS in over $1 billion in savings in air freight costs from 2021 to 2024. However, this caused lower postal volumes that left FedEx with higher operating costs on the USPS deliveries. FedEx and the U.S. Postal Office negotiated to extend their contract, but after neither side could come to a mutual agreement, FedEx, quote, expressed its willingness to end the partnership if the terms of the existing agreement did not improve. And FedEx walked away. In 2023, FedEx executives saw the writing on the wall and started preparing for life after their once biggest customer. In the midst of a pilot shortage, they suddenly had a pilot surplus, and they started squeezing their pilot ranks. FedEx was proud of never having furloughed pilots, and leadership was getting ahead of this upcoming problem. And some will say, and there's probably some truth to it, that really all this was also a play in the ongoing and contentious pilot contract negotiations that have been going on since 2021. But that's a different topic. Regardless, FedEx found itself with too many pilots after the USPS contract expired and has focused since then on some structural changes to save costs. Enter the new contract with UPS and the United States Postal Service. It began on September 30th, 2024, and is contracted through about 5.5 years, with a portion of the entire UPS fleet down now with the grounding of the MD-11. UPS is now under more pressure than ever to deliver on the contract, just as FedEx was 25 years before. And I talked to some insiders. The UPS planes, like the FedEx planes 25 years ago, are flying significantly more right now than they were before the contract last year. Now, UPS did prepare. They purchased more 767s and actually a couple of used 747-8Fs, the freighter version, since the last new 747 rolled off the assembly line in 2023. They picked up 2 Qatari 747s. UPS hired more crew and maintenance personnel, but my inside sources tell me that the planes are working harder with longer work days, more turns, more legs. And again, because I know I'll hear about it in the comments below, I'm not saying that this is what caused the recent tragedy in Louisville. I'm just saying it's something that needs to be looked at, and I'm sure the NTSB will look at it. Could be nothing there. And as I was researching, I just found this whole FedEx bump interesting. The FedEx bump principle really is about take a machine that quickly has to ramp up volume, requiring significantly more maintenance, more crew, more equipment. And if you're slow in any of these, you'll have to work the machine more, and the machine can break down, leading to the FedEx bump. UPS is going to be okay. It's extremely sad for the UPS family and really the aviation community to lose these heroes that were flying that plane. And as a company, UPS has been around for 118 years, and they have about $2 billion in profit per quarter. They will overcome, and as their slogan reads, they'll keep moving the world forward. And as for FedEx pilots, while there's no laying off, the airline is finding creative ways to avoid furloughing. This grounding of the MD-11 is going to make the harsh situation there a little harsher in the upcoming months. We'll just have to see. There is a lot to take away from this tragedy and the situation between UPS and FedEx to help us be better pilots, better people. The early struggles that FedEx faced and the challenges confronting UPS at the moment, it reminds me to prepare for rainy days, to not get myopic, but to keep my head up and look to the near future and what I should be preparing for. Even when preparing for what I think is coming, to be ready to read and react if the wave is bigger or smaller than what I was expecting. The more I can mentally, physically prepare for what's coming, the better I can not just survive, but maybe even thrive. Another important takeaway is the impact to an incredible nonprofit that truly changes the world, Orbis. If you can, go to orbis.org and do what you can to help this wonderful organization. I'm sure that they had flights planned in the near future, and hurting people that were looking for help will not receive it this winter. And I'm sure that whatever fix that the FAA and the Boeing engineers land on will not be cheap for the Orbis team. Let's see what we can do. There's a yellow Donate Now button, and it's easy. Thanks for watching, and thanks to our sponsors like Flying Eyes, the best glasses under helmets, hats, and headsets. Right now, they're giving away a free pair of glasses, and I'll put a link to that contest in the description below, or you can order them at flyingeyesoptics.com/takingoff10 for 10% off your order. And if you haven't seen our recap on the UPS 2976 crash, we've got the latest updates right here. Thanks again for watching. I enjoy reading your comments, well, for the most part. Remember, superior judgment trumps superior skill. Take care.